What an amazing story. And after years of thinking the way that she thought, Hope joined an alpha group. And she realized that she didn't have to have all her questions answered before she made a decision about what she believed. And she said this: I understood that I can learn along the way. That night, I got into bed and I prayed to God, asking Him for help. And when she walked into the church after so long away, she knew that God existed and she knew that He loved others, but she never felt that He loved her. And then she said, now I know He does. Despite all my failings, He is there and He cares. The past is in the past. And she said, since giving my life to Jesus, I am so at peace. Something has clicked. The anger that I felt for so long has disappeared. I have had so many recovery wins, from eating food on a long haul flight to not feeling highly emotional when I weighed myself. For the first time, I am excited about the future. Friends, don't cope with life on your own. You weren't meant to, none of us were. The Greek word for devil is diablos, which comes from the word which means to split, to divide, to drive a wedge between people. The first occasion where the devil used that was he split up Adam and Eve from God. He divided them from each other as well. He's still trying to divide us from one another. Seen in Hope's life as she battled with her health and relationship with God. But when our home groups are committed to loving fellowship, it is not easy for a church to be divided. So we need biblical nourishment. We also need loving fellowship. And the third vital sign is vibrant worship. Home groups are places which encourage worship. I'm not meaning one style of worship over another style. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is worship in its purest sense. It's about connecting our lives with God, who deserves our worship. This worship comes from our hearts. 3,000 people, it says, were added to the church on that one day. Do you think that church worshipped and celebrated that day? You bet they did. The reason that 3,000 people responded to Peter's altar call was not because his sermon was so eloquent, but because Jesus' ministry was life-changing. Case studies were sprinkled throughout the audience that day. Maybe Jairus, whose daughter Jesus raised from the dead, maybe he was in the congregation that day. Perhaps the woman Jesus spoke to at the well was one person in those 3,000. Dare I suggest that maybe Barabbas, the man set free when Jesus was condemned, was in the 3,000 that day. There would have been people in that crowd who could say that their lives have been transformed by the ministry of Jesus. And now they wanted to give their lives to Jesus, to follow him. And that is what true worship results in. And so there are vital signs: biblical nourishment, loving fellowship, vibrant worship, and finally the fourth vital sign is effective outreach. Home groups are places where people's lives are changed. One of the most well-known home visits that Jesus did, and he did quite a few of them, was to Zacchaeus' house. We're told that when Jesus walked in, Zacchaeus changed his life. It was like grace walked in the front door and selfishness scampered out of the back door. basically Jesus changed Zacchaeus' life because he was lost. His life was spiraling out of control. How many of us can recall times when we felt that our lives are much like that too? But Jesus wants us to understand that a person is worth something simply because he or she is a person made in the image of God. The Pharisees were asking Jesus to behave like a doctor who avoids sick people, but such a doctor clearly couldn't do his work. That is why we want our home groups in Christchurch to continue growing, to attract more people all the time, changing more people's lives. And so we want our home groups to have those 4 vital signs: biblical nourishment, loving fellowship, vibrant worship, effective outreach. The picture of the early church in Acts is remarkably and refreshingly simple. These believers did the basics well. And perhaps it is true, and that is a clue to where some church problems begin. It's so easy to move away, to get distracted from these primary activities. But as we, the body of Christ, return to this simple spiritual diet and exercise plan and stick together like glue, we can partner with the great physician to see the renewal in our church family through the home groups that work so well. Thanks be to God for his word to each and every one of us. Amen.